Hello there, and welcome to A Film a Day with me, Jordan Woodley. Now, as I said all the way back when I started this, there was always going to be the possibility that I was going to push my luck with what I would define as film. Of course, previously I've done things like short films, and I've, amalgamated different things or slightly bent the rules. But this is definitely the first time that this is the furthest I am pushing what counts as film, as this is technically sold as a special. But I absolutely, having now seen this, have to talk about Bo Burnham's Inside. Because this film, and it is a film, I suppose, it is feature, it is within the feature-length parameters. Yes, it's released to Netflix, but so are many films at the moment. And though it is advertised and marketed as a special, this is probably more of a film than some of the more experimental films that I've covered on this channel. And so I do think it has its place, and it absolutely warrants discussing, because this is a remarkable piece of at its core, it's a musical comedy, right? And that's on the simplest level, it is just a musical comedy, and yet it is such a document of not only the lockdown experience, but also the sort of the generational representation of people of, I suppose, for me as a what am I, generation Y? This is a representation of the Generation Y experience. Maybe even broader, that are at least people from, say, their 20s to their 30s. This is our experience at this specific time. Musical comedy could easily be written off as just, it's just another comic form. It's not that much more interesting than pantomime, and it often is the device used by stand-up comedians to slightly create more of a variety within their repertoire. And yet, you look back at things like Tim Minchin. Tim Minchin to me was such a, he had so much more to say than just telling comedy songs. That, I've got several Tim Minchin DVDs where his vision is to take you on a quest and to talk about different things going on in his mind and to express ideas through music and song and comedy and to blend them together. And yes, something like a Tim Minchin performance is, within the strictest rules, a stand-up comedy performance. And Bo Burnham is absolutely within that heritage. This is ostensibly a stand-up comedy musical performance. And yet, because of the circumstances that we're in, because this was entirely performed within isolation, with him alone, he wrote, produced, filmed this by himself, it creates this sense of experimental filmmaking that, frankly, it is a remarkable film. It is, because it's about, I suppose, the expression of, the lockdown experience. As I've said when I discussed the documentary Life in a Day 2020. This kind of period is what you might call a reflective one. That if we have filmmakers and creatives, storytellers in isolation, they are going to use that time to reflectively examine, the way, the creative process. And although, yes, that didn't quite happen as I thought it would, Bo Burnham is the embodiment of that. It's about someone who, the way that he structures the story is him going through lockdown, almost in a diary-like sense, intertwining, songs that he's written and created and performed with the creative process of those songs. And of course there are sketches and you know, some bits that are clearly him just, you know, expressing something that he feels on that day. And yet the way that it's structured, you genuinely feel like someone who goes through the early stages of lockdown through to the late stages of lockdown. And how, as creatives, we have had to find ways, alternative ways to express ourselves, to tell stories, to relieve the creative anxiety that we felt, not only because we haven't been able to, you know, go to the places that we usually do to express ourselves and to connect to audiences and to connect to other performers, but also to express the general sense of anxiety and malaise that we've gone through being stuck indoors, being stuck in our homes. And Bo Burnham absolutely finds the way to be able to do that. You know, the early songs are much more about him trying to tell funny political social commentary songs and do these funny bits that are about, you know, things that are going on societally, and the sort of the self-aware way that he is, you know, a middle-class white man, you know, not being entirely sure how to weigh in on social and political issues, or whether he should at all, and you know, does these surreal, almost Mighty Whoosh-esque set pieces. And yet, as you go later on, it becomes more about the fact that once you strip away the commentary and the social and political ideas, and it becomes more, over the course of the film, it becomes more internal and an examination of self and the idea of how we cope, you know, how we creatively cope, how we psychologically cope when we are sealed away with no one but ourselves for company. And I think it's, honestly, it's funny and dark and contemplative, and you know, and it doesn't, it's an expression, and so there isn't a sense of, oh, we need to hit these points at this point within the narrative and there will be a conclusion. It's very much a think piece, a creative outlet where it just allows him to express different emotions depending on different parts of lockdown. And honestly, this is a remarkable film. This is, you know, I've often talked about the limitations of filmmaking. You know, the idea that, you know, you take a film like Tangerine. Tangerine was famously a film that was recorded entirely using iPhones, and yes, it you know, the filmmaker did use lenses to enhance the filmmaking process. So it's not just people filming on phones, but you know, the fact that he had this limitation meant that it gave us a different lens and a different style of storytelling. You know, in the same way, 8th Grade. Now, 8th Grade isn't a film that's limited in that way, and yet it wanted to try and use, you know, the perception of iPhones and the way that people sort of express and experience things through iPhones and Androids, you know, as a way, you know, as a lens to the younger generations who are growing up with this. And of course, Life in a Day, which is entirely structured on people blogging and vlogging and you know, performing to cameras and you know, webcams and iPhones and tablets and, you know, and all the ways that people sort of have had to express themselves. And what Bo Burnham does with this is you know, it is filmed. You know, he may have, as far as you can see, an Android or iPhone, a laptop, maybe a camera, but the fact that it's almost entirely static, and the ways that he has to tell the story and express is entirely using things like lighting and things that he has to rig himself and control himself while still performing, shows the ability and creative potential of someone if they have, you know, the right vision and the right idea of how they want to tell a story. It can be done with such limited resources. You know, and of course I haven't talked much about the comedy of it, and the comedy is very funny. Yes, it goes to dark places and surreal places, but there are moments where it is structured. You know, the humour, despite the fact that he is a stage performer traditionally, you know, he writes these jokes and this has this style to it that, you know, is someone who knows how to perform to an audience and yet also knows how to perform to himself. He even references the fact that he doesn't know how this is going to come across because he doesn't have an audience and he doesn't know if it's going to work. And I just think there are moments that are very funny. And there's no point talking about the comedy because, you know, comedy is subjective. And yes, if it was a comedy film, I might be more analytical about it. But I do think this style is either something you're either going to take to and love, or it's not going to work for you. And there's no way to relay that. It is if you want to see it, you have to see it, you know? And I just think, like I say, as a document of 2020, this is important, and I think this is the kind of narrative that people will look back on and go, well, you know, how do we remember 2020, or how will people look back at 2020 through a creative platform, a creative medium? And I think something like this is the perfect document of that. No, I do think this is worth time, and as I say, some people won't take to it. It is something that people might start watching and go, it doesn't do it. This doesn't work for me because it's too surrealist or it's too strange. But if you do give it a chance, I honestly think this is worth people's attention. Anyway, thank you for joining me. If you like this video, hit the like button, comment below and share the video because that's all helping the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel and hit that little bell to get notifications of when new videos are uploaded. And do check out my back catalogue of over 150 videos. Follow me on Twitter at Jordan_Woodley, where I'm always tweeting about TV shows and films, and I share these videos once they're uploaded to YouTube either the day of or the day after. Thank you for joining me. Take care.